What's going on, guys? And welcome to episode 32. I am your host, Marcus. And in this episode, we are talking about divorce. Now, it is one of those topics that a lot of people stray away from. I know even as a kid, it wasn't something that was really talked about, but nowadays it is more commonly talked about. It is more common in general. And so today, what I wanted to do is a lot of different episodes that I've had talk about a lot of different tool sets to help you change your mindset, but I want to start incorporating a little bit more events and my experiences through different events in my life, and some of the tools and stuff that I've used that I've talked about, and essentially how it helped me guide me through different events in my life, and understand that divorce is one of those things that is very much life rattling, right? And in my opinion, and this is purely my opinion, this is purely my experience and things that I see when it comes to divorce, right? I think a lot of people hold on to relationship for the wrong reasons. And a lot of times that divorce is delayed and pushed further down the road. And you find that you eventually come to the same endpoints where you're both have been done for a very long time. You've come to this point to where, okay, I guess we should finally actually get a divorce. And from this point, you may be asking yourself, well, I've wasted so much time. And I've been there. And that's why I'm explaining this, right? You feel like you've tried so many different things. I'm not casting shade or casting blame on other parties here. But what I'm saying is, yes, it does take two to tango, but you have to also understand, right? If you are in a bad environment, right? Just for either one of you, if you find like you can't enjoy each other's company anymore, you find that things just aren't what they were, right? Things aren't always going to be what they were. They're never going to be back to that point where you perhaps fell in love with that person. And that's something important to remember, because even when I have been in a marriage, right, it's always, well, it will get better. At one point it was good, right? At one point it was good. That's why you got married. But you have to realize that it is not that way. It'll never be that way again, because we change all the time, right? And as much as we may hope and we may believe that the marriage will get to that point again, it won't, right? It's consistently changing. Our lives are consistently changing. Our thoughts and ideas are consistently changing with all the new things that we learn throughout our life and things that we experience through our life, right? And we like change. If stuff doesn't change, as humans, we purposely do things to make things change. And being so, when you incorporate a relationship into this and talking about divorce, for whatever the case is, right, you should go at that how you may, right? Like if you are to the point to where you are actually getting a divorce, there's a lot of other things to start looking at. And I think that's what's important, because a lot of times when you get a divorce, you start wanting to cast blame on the other person. You don't want to take responsibility. And yes, the other person may have done other things. Yes, you may have done other things, right? But it's time to move on and accept what you're seeing day to day, right? A lot of times when you're around this time, this particular period, you start looking for validation from friends and family on why you should. And they may say, things are bad or things are good. What are you even talking about? Why would you want a divorce, right? But people don't understand what goes on behind closed doors and the struggles that you have in your mind. And understand at this point, right, is this some place you really want to be? Are you forcing it, right? If it's a forced effort, and this is something I don't ever agree with, right? You shouldn't be in a relationship that is forced, right? And what I was briefly talking about before, about how you shouldn't be you shouldn't do things for the wrong reason, right? You shouldn't be in a marriage for the wrong reasons, right? Just because perhaps you have kids, or perhaps you have a lot of assets together, or perhaps you have, whatever the other case is, right? You have to understand that doing this, right? We have to go back to the thing, and something I always talked about is you have one life, right? And there's that saying that you've heard, or perhaps you haven't heard, right? Man or woman, but the statement is essentially addressed towards a male, essentially talking about, a man has two lives, and the second life begins when he essentially realizes he only has one life, right? That's where you need to get at. right? You should get to a point, and this is something I talk about in a lot of my videos, is you shouldn't tolerate, right, the unnecessary. And to be able to do that, you have to be okay with uncertainty. And it's something I've talked about a lot of different times, is uncertainty is not easy for a lot of people to get over. You don't know what's on the other side, right? It may seem a lot better. You may take that step and you may not be anything at all that you realized, but you have to realize where you're at. And this is something I talk about when you're in any kind of relationship, right? You need to stand back. You need that separation. You need to actually see what's going on, right? Are you, is it so bad to the point to where, you dread going home, right? You keep yourself busy so you don't have to deal with what is going on in the house. These are major red flags, right? These are major things that are telling you that's not where you want to be, but yet a lot of times we keep ourselves in those relationships because of the fact that we are more worried about the uncertainty. And we have to realize that, even for myself, a lot of times I've taken that leap when it's come to divorce, when it's come to a lot of major life events, right? I've taken the leap, and it seems scary because you don't know, and your mind wants to know what's going on, and it predicts, right? And so you run through all the different scenarios in your head, only to find out that all these scenarios that you ran in your head are not correct, right? You have to believe in the understanding that you will be okay. Right. And it's something I've talked about, and not to get too crazy and out there, but I believe that there's whether we want to call it, the divine or whatever the case is, or, the power of attraction. I believe those things matter, right? Everything is made of energy, and then that's a fact, right? You can't deny the fact that everything is made out of energy. But living day to day, you tend to forget that, right? Because it's even hard just to think of your awareness and what you're doing in the current moment, right? Because we live so much in the past and in the future. That being said, we forget that the moment is what matters, and ultimately understand that, yes, we are all made of energy, right? And understanding that if you believe that you're going to be okay, you will be perfectly fine. And going through with it, right? You have to take chances in your life. And it's extremely important. If you're not taking chances in your life, you'll never get to where you want to be. And then you end up being hopeful for things that aren't going to happen, right? And I've talked about this before, especially being in a relationship. There are many times, I personally being in a relationship, I've wanted to change because the other person won't. I shouldn't say I wanted to change, right? The other person wanted me to change for whatever reason, or I wanted them to change for whatever reason. And when you become forceful about change, people are more apt to push against that. They'll do whatever you want to try to make it look right. It's not saying that they don't really want to change there, but they're not willing, right? They don't have a driving force, right? It's led to this point. So you have to understand, to this point in a relationship, it is not going to be, I want this relationship so bad, right? Because you still have that, right? You still have that sense of security. Like, I have this relationship, so I'm just going to go through the motion. You don't have that fearful force, right? Until someone says, I'm walking out, whatever the case is, and you get that, oh man, I'm going to be alone. And that is a whole other topic that I've talked about before, is about just being alone is extremely hard for a lot of people, right? You have to be okay with being alone and understand that you can do it. There are ways to do things, right? Whatever the case is. But ultimately, I'm just trying to get across the point that when it comes to a divorce, right, I think everybody has a choice, right? I don't think you should be forced in a relationship for whatever reason, right? You have your reasons to why you're going to get a divorce, right? If there is not change, right? I think we are all naturally, biologically wired to have change. And if there isn't change, we create chaos, whether we believe that or not. That's just in our human nature, right? If we get bored, we want change. Change has to occur. If it's not occurring, right? This is why I talk about in relationships, like, you should have like your separate lives, but you're building it together. You're together, right? And exchanging, talking, doing all that stuff. But it's like not working in the same job, right? You don't want to be working in the same job and seeing the same things every single day. You want to go out, experience your life, do whatever you got to do. And then at the end of the day, you talk, you communicate about everything that's going on. So you have something to talk about. right? And there has to be change there. If there's no change there, right, you're going to desire change, right? Subconsciously, you're going to want to desire some change. And so whatever way you'll go out and you'll seek that change, in whichever way or fashion that is, right? You'll find an outlet, some way, shape, or form. And then when you get to that point, it's getting over it. It's executing on it, right? Like especially if you live in if you're in a toxic relationship, right, and you don't see it as toxic, right? And this is what I talk about. You need to remove yourself from the environment to really see how toxic things are, right? And see how you feel the difference, right? Like, how do you feel when you're in that particular situation? How do you feel out of it, right? Because a lot of times I put myself in a situation when I excluded myself from the environment, I felt so much more alive. I felt more like myself, right? And then going in that environment, I felt nothing like myself. But it took for me to remove myself to be aware of how I was feeling in that particular environment and out of that environment, to realize that, man, this is not the way I want to feel. But then it's executing on that, right? And going through and following through and being okay with uncertainty that things will be okay, right? If you believe that things will be okay, they will be okay. Stop worrying about what you can't see, what you can't foretell, right? There are so many uncertainties in life, right? And we look for things, we look for security that is not really there, right? We've also been brought up to believe what security should be, right? Like, we have our own beliefs on what security should be, as opposed to just going out and being okay with the uncertainty, being okay that it takes a lot of confidence in yourself to be able to do that as well. And understand that you may have to build up confidence to be able to do that, but realize it can be done, right? If one human being can do it, one man or woman can do it, you can do it too. It also means you shouldn't tolerate any kind of toxic relationship, right? You shouldn't tolerate any kind of verbal or physical abuse. You shouldn't tolerate anything like that, right? And most of it, and I would say a good far majority of the time, verbal abuse is way more worse than any kind of physical abuse, because it drains on you for the rest of your life. If you're in a place where someone is constantly verbally abusing you, right, it takes a lot to get yourself out of there. That's something you have to keep in mind. But being said, right, I don't want to get stuck in the weeds here, because that's not what I wanted this podcast to be about. It was more about, from that point forward, when you decide that it is enough, when you have all your validations that you need, when you build up the courage to go through with it, right? Because that's what it matters. Like, I'm not living this life for the next 5 to 10 years, and because we've grown so far apart. And that person is not willing to change, right? And it has to be something that they've changed in themselves, not you have forcefully tried to change. And that's the biggest thing I didn't see, right? Is I didn't want to change. They didn't want to change, right? Forcefully trying to make each other change does not work. You have to want to change. You have to be able to see what is wrong within yourself to want to change. And maybe you do change and the other person doesn't change, right? At that point, is that something you still want to do, right? You shouldn't be the only one trying to make the change. It should be a two-sided street, right? It shouldn't just be you. It was a two-sided street when you got into it. It's not a two-sided street when you're trying to repair it. It should be both sides trying to make it work. And if it doesn't, then you know what to do from that point. But after the fact, don't cast blame on the other person. But you may go out and you may realize that, man, what have I done? Because that's always the first thing you say to yourself. What have I done, right? Because everything is so new. You have to build a new routine. And as hard as that is, right, you have to realize that it's for the better. It gets way better. You have to realize you've been wired a specific way. And so now you're trying to change that. So there is new routines. There is new things in your life that are going to happen. But being okay with that and realizing that, again, your second life only starts when you realize you only have one. and taking yourself and living to that thing that you want to really be, right? You shouldn't be forcefully in a relationship because somebody is pressuring you to be in there. You're pressuring yourself to be in it for whatever reasons because of X, Y, and Z. But then when you leave, right, you should give yourself time. Time matters, right? Yes, you're going to be emotional. I'm not saying when you get the divorce, you're not going to be emotional. You're not going to just be like, forget it. Maybe it was a really bad relationship and everything could have went wrong. They could have cheated on you. They could have done all these different things, but realize that, hey, you know what? I have control over everything, and realize that it's okay, right? Like, it is what it is. Give yourself time. Do whatever you have to do and move on. Right? It's not just going to be like, I hated that person so bad and now I got this divorce. You feel a weight lifted off your shoulders, yes. But you still have a moment of sadness. But just realize that I'm not going to just let it drag me down and feel like that was the only relationship for me. I messed everything up and now things just will never get any better. Things will only get worse from here. You can't think that way, right? Your mind is an extremely powerful tool, and the way what you focus on is what you will see in life. And so if you are coming at everything thinking that the sky is going to fall if you make this decision, the sky will fall when you make the decision. Or if you come in and say, yes, things will be bad, but you know what? They will get better. And they do. You just have to believe. And then from that point, right, you focus on what really matters. You focus on yourself. And it goes into all the different tools I talk about how self first matters, right? You have to focus on yourself. You have to build the foundation, make sure the foundation is solid, it's healthy and ready to go, right? Ready to essentially live that second leg of your life, right? It's a turning point. It's the pinnacle of your life. That point in your life, you said, at that point, I no longer tolerated that relationship in my life. It was a toxic relationship. I left because of this, whatever reason. You have, and from that point forward, I will not look back, right? Things will get better. They'll be bad before they get better, only because you have to realize you're working against the grain of your brain, right? And that's, I mean, not to get all technical stuff about how the brain works and all that stuff, but understand that your brain is wired that way. It's used to the routines that you've been in. Now you're trying to change it. It's possible. It gets better, right? And the best thing about it is that while you're, trying to rewire the whole thing, you can add stuff in there that you want in your life. You can add specific things, add the tools that I've done, right? Mindfulness, add the tools, breathing techniques, right? And self first, and taking care of your health and realizing how important that really is in your life. And then being able to take that and build on that foundation, starting new. And sometimes that sounds good, sometimes that doesn't sound good, but you have to understand that you are in a better place now. In living in a life where you're focusing on you and what you want to create. And a lot of times, even having kids and coming out of a relationship, you think about, well, I should stay in the relationship for my kids. And for myself, I even thought, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to give my kids a representation of what a happy life is supposed to be when I'm not happy? And what they're seeing, right? And what you may be forecasting to everybody about how great your marriage is. But we have to realize that behind closed doors, your kids see more than you think that they see. And they see how your interactions with your partner, they see all these things. Is that the model you want them to base every relationship in their life off of? Because that is what you are doing. And when I started thinking about that, that's exactly what I thought about. I don't want my kids to think a healthy or happy marriage, it looks like this, because it wasn't. Instead, we could be co-parenters and give ourselves the time, right? Sometimes that's easier said than done, right? Maybe the other person doesn't want that. Maybe the other person despises that, right? But you have to always be the person that's going to be the model, right? Like I've always tried to be the model for my kids and show them, right? Like this is what you should do. This is what you should not do. But you should live a life where you're happy. And that's what I try to relay to them all the time. That you're not forced into being in a situation that you're not going to be happy with. But they don't view their world on what you tell them. They view the world as in what they see you doing. This is what matters. So when you have kids, yes, it is a lot harder in a relationship, but this is what you should be paying attention to, is what actions are you taking that your kids are seeing, because that's how, again, they're going to base every relationship in their life off of, is what you are doing, the actions you take, the way you respond in a relationship. And if you're screaming and yelling at each other, which I found myself doing a lot, and dreading to come home and realizing all these other things, and realizing that from this point, right, this is not the aspect, right? Like my kids were small enough that I could recreate what it's supposed to be by leaving and starting over. And as hard as that was, I had to do it. I couldn't look back, right? It's just saying, okay, this is the point. I have to make the change now. Right? Like you have to reflect on where it's been, right? Like you've put in time, like how much more time before you're going to be like, okay, well, it's not going to work. To realize if I don't want to change, you can't change me. Maybe because we've been together, I'll try to change, but I don't really want to change. Because maybe even deep down inside, I don't feel like I have to change. A lot of times that might be the case. And so knowing that, moving forward, getting past the divorce, you need to start focusing on yourself, creating for yourself. Because life is about creating, right? You don't lose yourself, right? Maybe you feel like you've lost yourself. I know for a while, when I first got divorced, I felt like I lost myself. I didn't know who I was, but I've come across the idea that you are in constant creation of where you're going, because you're only as good as the actions that you've taken today. Not the actions you took yesterday, but the actions you're taking today. And that can be changed at any moment, right? And realizing that you're not ever old enough to change it. Not ever going to get stuck, right? It's all a mental game. If you continue to buy into it, right, that's the story that's going to be told, unless you actually take action and make a difference, make the changes that you want to see in your life, and not be hopeful. Hopeful doesn't get you anywhere. Many times I've tried to be hopeful, and I wish I could come on here and tell you, just be hopeful and things will get better. Yes, you should have some be hopeful in some way, shape, or form. I'm not saying don't be hopeful, but what I'm saying is being hopeful, you need to also take actions that align with the hope. You can't just be hopeful. It helps, yes, but you have to also be taking actions that align with it to see the progress. And then at one point in your life, after everything, when you're focusing on yourself, when you're creating the life that you want to create, right, you'll get past all the heartache, you get past all the routine, rebuilding a new routine and all that stuff. You'll have your own routine. You'll be at a happier place. You'll live in a better environment in which you thrive. And then you'll look back and ask, why didn't I do it earlier? Why didn't I do it when I thought about it at this particular point and I didn't? Life is what you create, right? It's what you create. You can't cast blame. We always have to take responsibility for our own actions, because that's the only thing we have control over. We don't have control over the other person's actions. You can't force somebody to love us. You can't force somebody to change. The more you push, the more they'll pull away. And things won't get any better. So you change yourself, or you may change yourself so much that you may not even want to be in that relationship, because you're putting so much effort in yourself. You're building yourself. You've seen what you've created. The other person doesn't want to do that. The other person doesn't want to change. Maybe you just outgrow them. But ultimately, when you get out, you have to focus. And when you get out, when you're divorced, you have to focus on what matters. You have to build a foundation and build those things that you want. Find something that you can create is something I always talk about. Create and build something for yourself. Whatever that is, right? Maybe you write a book, maybe you start a business, maybe you go back to school, get a new skill, right? Maybe you go into programming, maybe you do this, maybe you do that. The possibilities are endless. It's just being able to take the action to get there, getting past and realizing what's in front of you to get the divorce, right? I'm not, forcing anybody to get a divorce, but I'm ultimately understanding that you have to look at things. And this could be said about any relationship in your life, not just a marriage, right? You could be dating somebody. It could be a professional relationship, right? In business or whatever the case is. Ultimately understand, right? Like, make sure it's not just one-sided. Make sure you're not just giving and not receiving anything. Because when you get in that relationship where you're not receiving anything, the other person shouldn't expect you to stay around. Right? People will get tired. People will get exhausted of giving, and never receiving. This is also why you need to be mindful of those people that do give, right? If that's a relationship you want in your life, then you need to start reciprocating. If not, you need to let them know and let them go and be okay with that. That is your choice. Everything is in our choice. Everything is guided by what we want in our lives. And we have to take that responsibility. When it comes to divorce, okay, great, you've moved on. Let's not look back and let's look forward. Create in the now and wish for hope for a better, brighter future because of the actions you're taking today that will get you there to where you want to go and rewrite bad parts of your story. You think things are going to be worse? You can make them so much better. It is completely up to you. It's completely up to your mindset on how you're going to approach it, on how things will be. Don't be fearful. You have what it takes. Be okay with uncertainty, and all will be well.